Monsieur, pick up.
Hello?
What?
Hello?
Hello.
I'm sorry, did you see my Asian culture event at the Detroit Institute of Arts?
It sounds epic. I didn't get a chance to look at that one. But I did see, what was it, like a foam expo or something like that?
The battery show?
Oh, the battery. That's what it was. It was battery. It was some incredibly mundane item. Yeah. The battery show. I caught a glimpse of that. That looked interesting. How was the Asian Culture Expo?
It was just music. It was like a woman demonstrating Chinese instruments that grew up in Detroit and was classically trained. Where's your back to streaming?
It sounds awesome.
I don't even know if it's time-stampable to figure out if there's anything worth watching there.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you when the worth watching points are. I mean, it depends what you like. If you like intelligent conversation, what you might like some of the discussion between Monsieur and Melchizedek earlier in the chat. And if you like blood sports, you might like Kyle and Brundlefly yelling at each other. Hold on the subject of music, I figured out how to get the looper working again, so I'm gonna quickly put some background music in. But yeah, Duvid, Monsieur, go ahead.
What's up? I'm very low energy right now.
Yeah, I wasn't really. I just got home. I was actually watching that Our Boys, the new HBO thing about the Israelis. And then I saw you were streaming. Actually, Church of Entropy messaged me that you were streaming. Was she on here earlier too?
Oh, fuck. I'm bathtub streaming right now. What's up?
Okay, you live. Anyone want to hear my conspiracy theories about Israel Mansour? You want to do some critical thinking about possible scenarios in Israel?
Sure, why not? I'm not really following. Netanyahu was fucking toasted, wasn't he?
Well, he's in some trouble, but that's why I wanted to analyze a few different scenarios. One is the question.
The kingmaker Lieberman wants him out, doesn't he? Unity government without Netanyahu.
Well, I'm not sure Lieberman if he's a kingmaker. So I had a suspicion. One is the nuclear weapon question, and does Israel actually have nuclear weapons? And if they do, like, who knows about that? And it's saying, okay, I know. Naftali Bennett said like they haven't cut him in. So if Israel has nuclear weapons, they haven't told him about it. There can't be that many people who know about it. So if Lieberman is one of the people that knows about the nuclear weapons program, that could be why he's so important and going to be part of the coalition. Because my guess would be that your average Israeli politician, maybe not even Netanyahu, knows about the nuclear weapons.
I mean, I'm sure everyone knows Israel has nukes, but the details, yeah, I mean, these people who know details about nukes tend to be kept in important positions. I'm not speaking about Israel, just
yeah. I mean, I've been skeptical, and I've been willing to look at the possibility that it's a bluff, and Israel doesn't actually have nuclear weapons, and the evidence that Israel does is actually very limited. Jimmy Carter himself said that he doesn't think Israel has nuclear weapons, and I think the whole thing with Israel having nuclear weapons was before Jimmy Carter. So, like, if Israel had nuclear weapons, they had them, I think it was in the 70s already, so Jimmy Carter would have known about it, and Jimmy Carter said that he doesn't think Israel has them.
Jimmy Carter's a fucking moron. So I'll accept.
The president, I think he would have had the security briefings, and so.
I mean, look. First of all, Jimmy Carter's a fucking moron. I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't know anything about anything. This is the man who said that we need to end wars by just having everyone agree to not fight anymore, which is just stupid. And secondly, if he did know, I mean, kind of the whole deal is that you got to tell people you don't know fucking anything. Like, I don't know nothing. I didn't do nothing. So.
Yeah, but I mean, in general theory, Israel is believed to have got the nuclear weapons possibly in the late 60s, early 70s. And, Jimmy Carter was president at the end of the 70s. And
yes, but
the U.S. had intelligence knowledge about Israel's nuclear weapons,
share it.
Jimmy Carter would have had access to that information. So
look,
Jimmy Carter was president, if the U.S. gave him a security briefing and said, like, look, here's the evidence Israel has nuclear weapons, Jimmy Carter might be a moron, but I don't think he would have been on the news saying that he doubts Israel has nuclear weapons if he had been, shown conclusive evidence that they do.
Whether Israel has nuclear weapons or not, he would have given the same answer, which is you don't divulge those kinds of things.
No, like because every other U.S. politician has divulged it. Colin Powell, multiple U.S. politicians have said that Israel has 100 or 200. Even the recent Secretary of States have openly said that Israel has like over 100 nuclear warheads. And saying certainly the president would have had access to those details. I mean, there's no way that Jimmy Carter, as president, would not have had access, that they would have hid Israel's nuclear weapons from Jimmy Carter. So, I mean, I
trust Colin Powell. If he said they have nukes, way more than Jimmy Carter, man.
Did you see the articles about Rex Tillerson this week?
What about him?
I mean, he says that Netanyahu was telling Trump things, and Tillerson said Trump doesn't know what he's talking about, and basically that's why he got fired. Kushner forced him out. But he said that Tillerson was saying that Trump was getting bad foreign policy advice from Netanyahu.
I mean, it's possible that Netanyahu's giving bad foreign policy advice.
I would almost guarantee that. Like, I mean, personally, I would assume that Netanyahu, he might have a few good advice, like Israel might have a few secrets here and there, but my guess would be like if Netanyahu's trying to give Trump a bunch of advice or, undercover Mossad secrets about world affairs, that most of it's probably like not such great intelligence.
I mean, it depends on how much Netanyahu would want war with Iran, which is probably a great deal. But we didn't get war with Iran.
The IAEA has already rejected Netanyahu's most recent claim about their special intelligence of Iran. And I don't know if it's just referring to Iran or just like the generic what's going on in the Middle East or Russia or something like that, or even China. Even if it was terms of China, like, do you think Netanyahu has a better understanding of what's happening in China, or Tillerson does?
I think that with regards to China,
I could see Tillerson might know more about any of these things than Netanyahu would.
I think with regards to China, what Netanyahu would want to do is that now that he's accepted a shiny new Chinese base, he would try to downplay the Chinese threat as much as possible, which I don't agree with. But
so my main conspiracy theory was added basically to what Kevin Michael Grace said the other day, in that the likelihood that you could have, what's the possibility that Israel can't form a new coalition and there's a military coup, and that the military takes over the Israeli government and dissolves the parliament. And I think Kevin Michael Grace was saying something like that, possibly just in speculation, but I was thinking about that, and I could see that. I could see that, like, even Aaron, I was even speaking to some people in synagogue, and it's funny, the people who go to synagogue and don't know that much about Israel were like, that's impossible. But like people who actually have kids in the IDF, or that know quite a bit about Israel, they're like, yeah, I could see the military doing a coup and dissolving the parliament.
I mean, based in red pill. I have no special information about Israel, no sources, no professional opinions.
Well, yeah, I know that's why you're interesting to run it past is just not speculation, just as in terms of a logical analysis of scenarios. If the coalition works out that there is no way to a majority in terms of coalition for the basic reason that the left can't form a coalition majority without bringing the Arabs in, and it's very possible the left in Israel, they're not liberal in that sense. They're not going to bring the Arabs into the coalition, and the right will not be able to rise without Netanyahu, that there's no one on the right that has a big enough personality to form a coalition other than Netanyahu, that they're going to be at a complete standstill. And this is already the second election. They're already thinking of calling a third election. It's almost been a week already. Like Tuesday will be a week from elections, and it's unclear how they're going to form a coalition. They could already move to third elections. So you're talking about close to a year that Israel has been in this mess. To what's the point where so Benny Gantz is a general. He's not a politician. So this is already somewhat of a move for electorally the military to take over the government by running a general in the election. And so if the generals can't win in an elected a scenario, maybe they just do a military coup. And besides for international pressure and like whatever Jews, but from internally in Israel,
nobody's gonna fucking do anything if a coup is successful. I mean, why would they?
And no one could do anything. So I'm saying in Israel's already largely a military state, and they have a very top-down structure where you have the more elite units and the generals. So I'm saying if the military decides to take over the government and dissolve the parliament, it's unlikely that Israel itself would be able to stop them. Like, I mean, they could riot in the street, but the military is actually very respected too. That if the military did a takeover of the government in Israel, it's likely that a substantial amount of Israel would actually support that. And then what you're saying, what's international pressure? Like, let's say President Trump doesn't even give a crap, but like even if President Trump, they're going to cut. What are they going to do? They're going to cut the aid. They're going to the UN is going to pass resolutions, and I don't think you're going to wage war. Like you're going to go to war with Israel if the military does a coup, and that's certainly like a bad situation because if the military takes over the government, that means that they're ready to fight.
I really don't give a shit if Israel has a military government. I mean, I think that's, if they want to do that, that's like China. Awesome.
Most people don't give a crap about China, just like you're saying, like, why should you give a crap about Israel? But I was saying, just theoretically, like, if you were asking Kyle to ruminate about China, he might have some interesting insights, but, like, he doesn't really know that much about it or have that much of a stake. And that's just like Israel for you. You don't have any special knowledge. And, like, what does it matter to you anyways? But just to ruminate about the possibilities, that's what I was interested in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a military coups happen a lot in history, and it's certainly a plausible situation. I mean, how crazy? I mean, let me throw this out there. I have a question for you. How crazy is Benny Gantz? Is he a man that can be worked with?
I'd have to look. I don't know if he's got kills or not. It wouldn't surprise me if Benny Gantz is basically a cold-blooded killer. He's probably reasonable, intelligent, could be worked with, but it's very likely like he's a cold-blooded killer. He's killed multiple people in his lifetime. Right?
I guess, but more like how much is he going to work with America? How much is he going to try to, pull things his way? Because, like, I really don't like it when the Israelis try to play their little fucking games.
Well, so Benny Gantz would be Netanyahu, although he was, like, somewhat of a war hero for Entebbe. And he wasn't really, like, a war hero. Like, his brother died, and, he wasn't... I mean, he was in Entebbe. He killed a few people there. His brother died. But he's not a general like like Gantz. He's much lower ranking militarily, even though as like international, in terms of Israel, Netanyahu's very famous because the Entebbe raid was all in the news. Everyone knows about it, and his brother died, and it was a risky mission. But just in terms of pure military, Benny Gantz is much more of a military man. He's more higher ranked. He's not really a politician. He would probably be much more straightforward. Netanyahu's much more of a politician than a stone cold soldier. So in that sense, Gantz would probably be much easier to work with.
I like that.
There'd be much less trickery. It'd be much more like matter of fact. This is what we're going to do.
So, Babs, are you here?
I would even say if they were going to kill, if they were going to try to wage war against Iran, that you would probably be much better off with Gantz in charge of Israel than Netanyahu for Israel's sake. That like Netanyahu is, he knows too many international wealthy Jews. You know, like I don't know if he knew Epstein or not, but like he's too corruptible by his international reputation. Where I think Gantz is more of a sincere, patriotic military man, and that he would more likely make pure good decisions about what's best for Israel, as where Netanyahu is more likely delusional or would be thinking about like having a mansion to escape to in a different country or something like that. So if it was in terms of waging war, like Israel's looking annexation, they're going to annex all of Israel. God forbid they're going to expel the Arabs. They're going to attack Iran. That they would probably be better under Gantz.
Listen, here's Babs. Are you around? I see you in chat. Yeah. So like there have been incidents with Israel that are pretty upsetting, right? In terms of interfering with like requiring U.S. intervention. And I don't know about you, but I'm pretty mad about that. What about you?
You would prefer Gantz because Gantz would, Netanyahu's a trickster that he thinks he could outsmart everybody. He speaks English. English might even be his first language. So like Gantz is not a trickster. Like Gantz would just be making like pure military calculations and not relying on his ability to trick people would be my guess. So even like as a U.S. patriot, you would probably prefer working with Gantz than Netanyahu, but Gantz is not internationally useful for you. Netanyahu is extremely high IQ, went to MIT, has world connections, has probably in his index 100 billionaires on speed dial. And
yeah, okay, but like here's what I care about, okay, is that Iran is on Israel's border, which I think is a terribly
Iran and Israel.
They've conquered through Iraq and have made this little strip of Syria. Like
in Lebanon with Hezbollah. And that's why Israel keeps on bombing. I'm saying the fact is,
right? Okay, but
Israel has been bombing what they claim to be arms shipment from Iran to northern Israel in over 2 years.
They probably are actually arms shipments, to be honest. Here's
every week. Israel bombing a supposed arms shipment from Iran happens like every week.
Yeah. So here's what I think would be good is we come to some kind of agreement where Iran pulls away from the Israeli border so that I can stop hearing about it. And we're not going to go re-invade Iraq for the nth time for, I don't know, like this, it was a colossal fuck up. It's such a colossal fuck up. It's such a colossal. Sorry. What were you saying?
Netanyahu's a coward, probably at the end of the day, and he would, try to trick the U.S. into fighting for him, or try to send Israelis off to die for him. And where Gantz is probably a man of integrity and not a coward. And if he was going to go to war against Iran or Syria, he would probably lead from the front.
Yeah. So you get Iran, not back to Iran, but at least back to Iraq. Syria's a buffer state, and then nobody asks for anything else. Like, fuck off. What policy aims does Israel still want to accomplish at this point once that happens? The annexation of the West Bank? They can annex the West Bank. I mean, I've always preferred a one-state solution anyways, and I think a lot of people agree with me. So, I just don't want, what the fuck is going on? Is like a greater Israel plan or something? They have the allegiance of the Arab League. I don't know why they keep asking for Big Daddy America to go beat up Iran so they can expand into Iraq? ?
Well, it goes to the dual citizenship of American Jews. So Netanyahu wants at the same time Israel to be this modern, respected economic powerhouse, as opposed to Gantz, who might accept Israel as a rogue military state that could defend itself and loses a large portion of its international credibility. So Netanyahu's trying to do the balancing act, and the balancing act is largely based on American Jews being traitors to America. And so Gantz might just be like, fuck it. We're going to end the right of return. American Jews no longer have the right of automatic citizenship to Israel. They don't deserve it. And turn Israel into its own. You'll stop the two-faced game and just say Israel is for Israelis, not for Jews. No more fucking right of return. You don't have the right to, and then no more of this dual citizenship and having American Jews trying to affect policy and stuff like that. Not just America, like Russian Jews and Jews all over the world that are trying to play this like messianic game.
Yeah, I can see people like that being barred from office or political power before I see a complete revoking of the right of return. I mean, the right of return was basically what the concept of Israel was founded upon. It would be like Liberia revoking their right of return. I don't see a right of return being revoked even under a situation like that, but probably everything up unto that point is my guess. They might just say like banning like blatantly foreign sort of like Ameri-Jew interests from,
Well, I think the right of return, the revoking of the right of return is has to be a guarantee, because if they accept the Arabs into the coalition, you can't keep on stealing Arab land and giving it to foreign Jews.
Yeah.
You have to end the right of return.
Well, no, I think that's kind of silly because unless you consider what is like basically Israel to be the place that is the right of return, like plenty of, it's not a prerequisite for foreign Jews to even go into, let's say, settlements at all, and the idea, Israel's overpopulated. I don't buy it.
Look, I mean, you're making a pretty good case for Gantz if all of this is true, but I have no idea, and we'll see.
Well, I said Palestinians demand the right of return for them, and they actually were from there. You're talking about
So you're saying that Jews aren't from Judea? Of course, I mean, this is simply a matter of time. When certain Palestinians were in the land more recently, but then there are other metrics of, right to land. You could say, well, whose culture developed in the land, et cetera, and you can bring it down. Whose religion developed in the land, et cetera, so on and so forth. Who owned an autonomous polity in the region versus who had no desire to have an autonomous polity in the region. I don't really care.
Legitimacy is bullshit. International law is bullshit. Might makes right. The Israelis own it. I don't know why. It doesn't matter. It's cool. It's cool. It's fun.
To fight for it. So you're going to see if I always thought. This is conspiracy from a higher level, and it goes back into the nuclear weapons. And I always thought that Netanyahu was a CIA stooge.
He's one hell of a treacherous CIA stooge. Then I mean, I know that the CIA often has a bunch of bad apples, but like,
well, it goes to the nuclear weapons. And it's saying Lieberman, we know, is involved with U.S. intelligence. He comes here. He's part of the military establishment. That's probably why he's so important. If Israel does have nuclear weapons, it's almost certain that Lieberman is one of the guys who's intimately familiar with it. I mean, that you agree on.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, that's plausible. Sure.
That sounds pretty accurate. I mean, there's no documented proof, but you could see it's likely if Israel has nuclear weapons that the U.S. is in on it too. I mean, that's how does the U.S. know all this stuff? It's likely that the U.S. CIA or whatever has seen these facilities and knows about it.
Yeah, that's very plausible.
It's unlikely that the U.S. would be giving $3 billion a year in aid and have all these joint missions or whatever if the U.S. Top officials hadn't seen Israel's nuclear weapons facilities, or even that Israel's nuclear weapons are made in complete conjunction with the highest levels of U.S. intelligence.
Okay, sure.
That seems pretty likely if it's the case that Colin Powell has probably been to their plant. All Mike Pompeo, John Bolton, all these people that keep on going back and forth.
I'm glad that John Bolton is gone.
But I mean, you could see that John Bolton.
Yeah, absolutely.
He might have taken a visit to Israel's nuclear weapon facilities.
Yeah.
And he might even be helping Israel with their nuclear weapons.
Possible.
And Lieberman, saying, so who's in on those meetings? So if you have this extremely, I mentioned, I studied physics, and just as an undergraduate physicist, I already met multiple people that had been on site in American nuclear weapons facilities. Professor Duderstadt at University of Michigan did a slideshow showing the present state of America's nuclear weapons, where they're stored, even pictures of them, mentioning the security clearances that are necessary to be in those facilities.
A lot.
But I think did you have any friends that studied physics?
I don't even know what physics is.
But I think America's nuclear weapon program is not secretive. Like, you could have had a buddy that studied physics, and he could have visited and seen America's nuclear weapons facility.
Sure, yeah, I get it.
Anybody knowing about it, and even extremely high-level ranking people have said that Israel, they don't know anything about it. So if Israel does have nuclear weapons, maybe there's only hundreds of people in on it. There's probably not more than hundreds of people in on it.
Yeah, I mean, that's, with the programs, you can often have linchpins that are just a guy.
I mean, you could probably be a congressperson and get a tour of America's nuclear weapon facilities.
That seems plausible to me.
You could probably even be like a state clerk or something like that and get a tour of America's nuclear weapon facilities. As opposed to Israel, there is nobody that is admitted to it. There is nobody that even claimed to it. And top-ranking officials like Naftali Bennett has openly said that if Israel has nuclear weapons, they haven't told him.
It's not something that you want to spread the details of to a lot of people, I don't think.
Well, I'm saying that actually it is, because it's generally a deterrent, and
yes, but everyone knows that Israel has some amount of nukes, which is all that you need.
I mean, that's what I said. Jimmy Carter said that Israel.
Everyone believes that Israel has nukes. I've never heard anyone say that they don't believe Israel has nukes.
I've heard it from Israelis.
Hey, Monsieur, I heard Marshall say that nukes aren't real.
I'm not talking
I was about to say the reason why they aren't showing the nuclear facilities. I mean, hate to break the news, but
I basically dedicated my whole adult life to Judaism.
Dude, what's your take?
I guess I haven't seen a nuke either.
Yeah, what's your take, dude? What's your take on the NQ?
The NQ?
The nuke question.
Oh yeah, nukes don't real.
I would leave it about 50-50 that Israel, I certainly believe in nukes. But Israel having nukes, I would put even at 50-50. I think it's a 50% chance that it's a bluff and Israel doesn't actually have nukes.
Yeah, I mean, fucking hell. Has anyone ever seen a nuke at the end of the day?
No, I mean, you need security clearance in America. I'm saying, your congressperson has, I've met people who've seen nukes.
How do you know the nukes exist?
How do you know that nukes exist?
Well, I took Professor Duderstadt's course, He was head of the nuclear physics department at Michigan.
Professor Duderstadt?
Duderstadt at
I
University
guess
of
that makes sense.
His name's Professor Duderstadt?
Well, I mean, he laid the path to getting into being into the nuclear facilities. He was recruiting for people to study nuclear engineering, and he laid the path toward working in the American nuclear facility. He showed pictures of it, went over the security clearance guidelines. It's not a secret in the U.S. If you're a nuclear physics student, it's not that difficult to get to a point. Like, I have a bad background. He joked around like, you're like, okay, I have a drug past.
Wait, you have a bad background. What have you been doing, David?
Well, I think just my drug use.
Coke.
Just my drug use would, even if I was a top nuclear physics student, it's possible that I wouldn't pass clearance for the nuclear.
It wouldn't be because of the drug use, though. It would be because of the time that you got arrested for taking a stand for your political beliefs.
Well, yeah, I mean,
I think it would be from hanging around with Professor Duderstadt.
But whatever the case is, like, there's a clear path to nuclear weapons in the U.S. You could go to any physics department at any major state university and end up working in the United States nuclear plant. You don't even have to hide that from your family. It's not like, like an FBI secret agent where you have to lie to your family. You could be like, I work in the United States, nuclear weapons department, and you'll just have to flash my ID and get past security each day.
Yeah, that's interesting, I guess.
In Israel, that's not the case. But whatever the reason, like, the nuclear weapons question is extremely tied to what's going to happen in Israel. Because if Israel does have nuclear weapons, and it is a secret that literally, let's say, less than 100 people in Israel are in on, including the top generals and the politicians, that, even including the inner circle of top politicians in the Knesset aren't in on it, that will play a big deal in the coalition that's formed. So it's saying, like, why is Lieberman going to be part of the coalition? So the obvious answer, because he's in on the nuclear weapons. And then the question is, why is Duvid saying that it's pretty likely, reasonable that there would be a military coup in Israel? And part of it is because of the secrecy over the nuclear weapons. And if there is an inner group of elite military people in Israel guarding the nuclear weapons and not letting the masses of 99.99% of Israel know about it, that those people would be the most likely people to do a military coup and take over the government and dissolve the parliament. And there's also another factor, is keeping the Arabs out of the coalition. So if Benny Gantz could only form a coalition by allowing the Arabs into the coalition, and then when the Arabs have that power, are they going to have rights to the nuclear secrets? And then also, Israel's law is that the head of the opposition party gets the military briefings, just like President Trump has the daily military briefings. In Israel, the law is that the leader of the opposition party gets the daily military briefings. So as of now, if they did a unity government between blue and white and Likud, that would leave the Arabs as the biggest opposition party. So according to the Israeli law, that the Arabs would have to get the Israeli military secret briefing, which presumably Israel wouldn't want to do. So there's a lot of factors that point to the likelihood that Israel's in a very close situation to a military coup.
Yeah, to keep the Arabs out, I see.
Yeah, I mean, multiple reasons. And also maybe that America doesn't mind.
I don't really think anyone would have a...
What I'm saying is right, in that there's only like 100 Israelis in on the nuclear weapon, and the U.S. government's in on it, and Netanyahu's kind of like a CIA stooge, that the U.S. government could be in on a military coup in Israel.
I don't think Netanyahu's a CIA stooge.
I don't know if he's it depends what you mean by stooge. But Netanyahu was risen to power by the CIA. There's a reason why Netanyahu has been in power of 15 of the last 20 years. And
maybe he's a savvy politician. Happens all the time.
Yeah, but because he's being helped by the CIA.
I mean, the deep state only has so much power.
It's not a reasonable assumption to say that there's some power in the U.S. government that's propping Netanyahu up. I mean, what do you think, Rumi? I was just looking. I don't know how closely you're following the Israeli politics, or just speculating on what might happen in Israel, or the factor of the secretive nuclear weapons in terms of the future of Israeli government and the likelihood of a military coup, in Israel, or the likelihood of Netanyahu, of the U.S. government's role in propping Netanyahu up.
I think I haven't been following super closely, but I definitely think that there is a strategic alliance with Netanyahu and the U.S. government, and I definitely think that Israel has nuclear weapons and has done everything in their power. I mean, you can see back to Ben-Gurion, lying to Kennedy about the nature of certain visits and stuff. I definitely think that they have nuclear weapons, and that they've spent a long time covering that up. I also kind of have enough reason to believe that, like, Kennedy kind of being not in favor of Israel developing nuclear capabilities in the region may have led to him getting killed. I
don't know enough about that, but
I've read convincing enough stuff that didn't seem to be coming from total crackpots about that.
Yeah, but it could be.
But I haven't been following. I haven't been following the upcoming Israeli election.
But saying not just the Israelis, but some sort of joint CIA-Israeli effort together
to keep Netanyahu in power.
Well, I'm saying, God forbid, the JFK assassination.
Right. Yeah, I don't think it was just like Israel acting totally on its own. No, but I think that there's been a strategic alliance with certain forces in the Israeli government and military and the CIA for a long time. I don't think there's any real denying that. Like the evidence is pretty clear. I mean, a lot of the connections between the recent Epstein stuff and Mossad and the CIA and this long history of sexual blackmail dating back to like Meyer Lansky, like Jewish organized crime and sexual blackmail and its involvement with the CIA.
Well, that's why
it's been going on for a long time, so I definitely think they're like intimately woven at this point.
That's why Netanyahu could be CIA stooge. That let's say when Netanyahu was in MIT, he banged some shiksa, and that shiksa went on to get a job and work for the CIA, and secretly Netanyahu has been banging her every few years. God forbid.
Is this a purely hypothetical, or is this a working theory?
This is a hypothetical. I don't have any inside information, but I meant to say, how is it possible that Netanyahu is a CIA stooge? It means that the U.S. has that shiksa he banged in university working for intelligence, and she might even come over as part of the entourage.
Is this just a setup for some sort of shiksha porn where it's like Netanyahu given the big Jew? I don't know where you're going with this.
Well, I'm saying that the honey trap thing is not necessarily Israel doing it against other people. It could be the honey trap operation could be a CIA operation, because chances are most of those girls were shiksas, and if you're saying it was a honey trap operation that they were using Israeli women, or you're saying that the Israelis completely recruited and ran the honey trap, or you're saying it's more likely that the honey trap operation was set by some different organization, and Epstein was just like a pervert who lost control of himself. He wasn't the mastermind, and Ehud Barak was just a pervert. Alan Dershowitz. These guys were just perverts that lost control of themselves. And there's other organizations, whether it couldn't, maybe it's not even the CIA. It could be business or who knows, British royalty or anything.
All right.
I think one of like the most unfortunate things about Netanyahu being such a powerful political figure right now is honestly just like well, for better or for worse, Israel is. I'm not really going to make any qualitative judgments on that, but right now at least, but Israel's is Judaism's face to the rest of the world. And the amount of animus toward Israel that's developed. I mean,
Netanyahu is unbelievably terrible optics, like beyond belief, like everything. It's just like it's like the pick and choose of like the worst of both worlds of like the internationalist and like the nationalist and the supremacist and the it's just so everything is terrible.
I mean, say what you will about Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, but like I mean to take like these two like up and coming congresswomen that have many favorable eyes and to bar them entry from the country, like that is like the worst PR move. Like is he less hawkish than Netanyahu?
He's not delusional. Netanyahu's more hawkish because he's delusional.
Okay, sum up Gantz for me. I haven't been paying attention to this at all.
I mean, he's a legitimate general. He's not a politician. He was specifically recruited because he was the most PR-friendly general to defeat Netanyahu.
Right.
I mean, he's just a generic, like, Israeli general that went right.
Where does he stand? Where does he stand on like on settlements and things like that? That create a lot of controversy for Israel, at least on the world stage.
He claims to be to the right of Netanyahu, although the spectrum of politics, they say he's a leftist. But in terms of annexation and use of military force, he's actually to the right of Netanyahu. He was upset that they backed off of the Gaza war a few years ago and thought that the Israeli troops should have permanently dismantled Hamas in Gaza. He claims that Netanyahu's annexation plan was stolen from him, and that Gantz's annexation plan is actually superior to Netanyahu's. And in terms of I think Netanyahu is he's just a big talker. My guess would be Gantz is a legitimate military man. He probably knows almost nothing about politics or statecraft or anything other than military, and that's why they ran him against him, because Israel, the military is the most respected institute in Israel. So they probably figured the only way to defeat Netanyahu would be to put the most respected general that they could find up against him.
Yeah.
And as I said, Netanyahu's not really like a seasoned military man. He's just famous because he had those kills at Entebbe and his brother got killed there. But he's not like he didn't rise in the ranks much past that.
I'm gonna have to start following this election now.
I mean, you're a Jew. I'm saying, like,
Yeah, I feel
I'm
for having not been paying
sort
any.
of the Chinaman by saying, like, yeah, I mean, you might as well read up on it if you care about Israel.
Yeah, I know. I need to be.
I care about Israel to the extent they make me care, which ideally would be little to none.
Yeah.
Well, I think Gantz would. You're saying Netanyahu makes you care because he forces you to be involved, and he wants to trick you into doing the bidding on his behalf because he's basically delusional. As opposed to Gantz, he could probably accurately assess the capabilities of Israelis' military power, and Gantz could probably also accurately assess what Israel could do without the help of America. And he, as a true military man,
Yeah, okay.
his own
You
back.
said he's pro-annexation? Like, I want this annexation to finally fucking finish, and then never hear about it again, really.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Gantz would do the fighting for himself. Like he's
That's good.
He's not a Netanyahu who's going to try to trick you into fighting for him. Like if Gantz thinks the fighting's worth doing, he would probably prefer to do it himself.
Okay, well, if that's true, then that's good. I like Gantz. I don't know if I believe you because I do know you have some sort of vested stake in this, but, you know, maybe it's true and then I'm pro Gantz.
Well, I don't have insider information. I'm saying you could look all the stuff up I said.
No, but
Okay, so not that this is the best source for anything, but the Los Angeles.
I'm saying that I don't have inside information, so I have no reason to believe anything, really.
Well, I'm saying what about just the fact that we've already had 2 elections and they can't form a coalition, and it looks like they're not going to be able to get a coalition, and they're in some serious danger. What does it mean that Israel that this is the second time around and they can't form a coalition? As an outside observer, does that make you think like maybe the Israeli government's about to fall and there's going to be a military coup?
I mean, it does suggest instability. I'm gonna go.
Yeah. I met an Israeli musician living in Brooklyn now. Very smart guy. Recently, and we were talking for 4 hours or something, and he was just talking about how he's a few years older than me, so in his late 30s, and he was just saying how maybe he's in his 40s, but he was saying how essentially like his generation and pretty much his entire family in Israel like at this point like the patriotic fervor which you could feel in that country even 10-15 years ago, he says is outside of like the more kind of extreme, like he said, like among more centrist kind of types who live there, he said like centrist and left of center, he said it's just like people are like at a point of absolute disgust, like like 1,000 times worse than any Trump hatred that you even hear on the left here, as far as just people being so disgusted with their government and just really feeling like no strong sense of connection to the political process, or like Israel, even the idea of Israel is starting to become, I think, less important to people who live there. This is just his take. Like, he just finds that like a lot of people are just like have just been so revolted for so long now.
Israel should just take the Arab children and take them away from like their family's upbringing and just fucking send them to special schools where they will be told they are Jews. The end.
Yeah, I don't have any answers. I
mean, you wouldn't be allowed to do that. I'm just saying that this is beyond absurd.
What's beyond absurd?
The Arab situation.
But we got Aaron on. I don't know if he has any insight on what he thinks the possibility of a military coup in Israel is.
Yeah, it's not possible. It's not a high possibility. Yeah, we have to separate between Duvid's high IQ wishes and what reality actually is. So there's no threat of the military coup. all the generals in Gantz's party are retired, and if anything, Bibi has the power to do a coup over Gantz.
Yeah,
Okay.
does Bibi have the support of the military? Saying, would the military back Bibi if he just if Bibi declared himself dictator
Okay,
and dissolved the parliament, would the military back him?
Dude, for the sake of discussion, can we move just so we don't get like steered into like this direction like too far? Like, can we back away from like pure hypotheticals? Like, there's no indication that like a military coup is about to happen, and like because what's the point of discussing this? Like,
Well, yes, there is, because they can't form a coalition.
it seems like there's like instability, but
there's an election and they can't form a coalition. That's some serious instability.
it's serious instability, but there's no suggestions of a military coup.
Okay, so you seem like you know things. What should I think about Gantz? Are you pro Gantz? Are you Gantz pilled?
You're asking Aaron.
Yes.
That's the problem with Gantz. Nobody knows what Gantz is as a politician. He's never been a politician, and as a general, he was very milquetoast. He wasn't something special as a general. So
my assessment is that the fact is that the military is the most respected institute in all of Israel. So Gantz was basically just recruited as the best possibility to defeat Netanyahu.
Well, he's the favorite of the deep states in the media. So he's got a lot of counts against him that get buried by the media and deep states. So he's the favorite to win. Like, Bibi looks like he's the inside man, but he's really the outsider the whole time. He's been fighting deep states like Trump is.
Yeah, but Israelis worry about what Duvid said, that possibly Netanyahu's a CIA stooge or something like that.
Well, I don't know. You come up with things that I can't relate to. I can't. But I think that what you need to focus in when Duvid says things like this is why Duvid wants this. Duvid wants the status quo. He wants he's rooting for the religious to keep the status quo and not to enter into the army. That's his main objective.
Well, no, I'm saying I don't have a stake in that. I mean, because God forbid.
Yeah, you're rooting for them.
Well, no, I mean, saying let's say I'm rooting for Mashiach to come and saying just to wage the war. God forbid the military coup and they expel the Palestinians and destroy Iran, and that the best way to do it is a military coup.
How so?
Because politics gets in the way of the military. The military is just like, we're going to do this. We're going to expel all the Palestinians, and we're going to bomb the hell out of Syria, Lebanon, and Iran, and we don't want the Knesset getting in our way, so they're just going to dissolve it.
The military wouldn't do something like that. Look at Sisi takes over Egypt. They didn't do anything crazy. I mean, the military can be very boring.
If Israel wants to go to war, the Knesset's just going to get in their way. It'll be better off to dissolve it.
Is that what you want, Duvid?
It doesn't matter what I want. I'm not talking about what I want. I'm just analyzing scenarios. What my desire has nothing to do with my analysis of the situation. You're saying, if I'm telling you we're all going to die, it's going to be Armageddon, and every single last one of us is going to be dead tomorrow. You're saying, is that what you want, Duvid? Like, no, it's just a possible scenario we're talking about.
Okay, but I think that a unity government is actually going to bring more
you can't have a unity government.
Social change, right?
The Arabs then would have to get the military briefings.
No, not with a unity government. A unity government is with Bibi, Lieberman, and Gantz.
And then the largest opposition party would be the Arabs, and as the largest opposition party, they get the top secret military briefing.
Right. There's a joke in Israel of how we're going to actually inform the Arabs about the military option. There's a skit.
You're going to break your own constitution. You're saying that the Israeli state is going to actively not follow the constitution, not follow the basic laws, and not give the military briefing to the Arabs when the basic laws say that that's what they have to do.
Possibly. But it's not a big deal. Military knows best.
You don't think it's a big deal that they could have a unity government and then just like make a new law that the Arabs don't get the military secrets and they could just change the law, no problem.
I think they'll just organically, informally not tell them all the things that they need to know or they're accustomed to knowing. And I'm not really sure how much the opposition party really got briefed historically anyway. Like there's even people in the what do you call it, the not the coalition but the cabinet, the war cabinet, they would always complain that the minister would just act alone and not inform people in their cabinet. So if the cabinet's not even being informed, I don't think we have to be really worried about the opposition party being informed.
Well, that's why I was talking about the nuclear weapons, where it's saying like even people in the war cabinet don't know whether Israel has nuclear weapons or not.
I don't think that's true.
I
think it's secret.
That the Israeli politicians themselves have denied knowledge about Israel's nuclear weapons.
I mean, I spoke to a guy that did his army service there, and he didn't give me any details, but that was his job. And
He was in the nuclear facilities, and he saw Israel's nuclear weapons.
Yeah, and the chemical weapons. So, like, they have to have workers do it. It can't just be run by itself. It's an open secret. I mean, it's not.
Well, what about Jimmy Carter said that he thought they didn't have it, even though it said Israel got the nuclear weapons in the late 60s, and Jimmy Carter's president in the late 70s, and he said that Israel doesn't have nuclear weapons.
Maybe he just said that, David.
Don't believe every anti-Semite says, I think. But David,
why would Jimmy Carter lie and say Israel doesn't have nuclear weapons? You say, is it possible that Jimmy Carter didn't know?
Why would Jimmy Carter lie? Because he was a president of the United States of America.
Why would he lie and say he didn't think Israel has nuclear weapons? If what motivation is there for Jimmy Carter, at whatever his reasoning, to lie and say Israel doesn't have nuclear weapons?
Yeah, you can just move on, just as David's roommate says, like presidents lie, and they have their reasons.
What reason would he have to say Israel doesn't have nuclear weapons?
I don't know.
Israel didn't want him to say that, and Israel has a lot of cachet in the American government, and I mean,
Well, I'm saying two things. If Israel has nuclear weapons, Jimmy Carter almost certainly knew about it, knows about it.
Yeah,
so
I'm sure Jimmy Carter lied about lots of things.
What motivation could there have been for Jimmy Carter?
I don't know. Why did George Bush say that there were weapons of mass destruction, and there obviously wasn't? Why?
As an excuse to go to war, that's obvious.
Right. So Jimmy Carter, like, what are the reasons that you think that, like, he wouldn't want the American public or the general, like,
well, as an excuse,
the rest of the world to know that Israel had nuclear weapons? I think that there's
you could say because as an excuse for maybe Israel's enemies to attack her, saying that Iran, if Jimmy Carter is saying to Iran, like, don't be so scared, Israel doesn't actually have nuclear weapons.
Yeah, but I think that, like, it's real. It's like they don't want it out there, out in the open, that they have if they have nuclear weapons. So,
do you see how much people want unity government?
A powerful Israeli lobby, like, within the country and within the government, then, like, yeah, he would probably adhere to that.
Dude really doesn't want a unit government. You can see, like, he's deflecting. He doesn't even want to think about it. It's really the tension.
Well, I never knew you were such a big.
I don't see the purpose of a unity government other than to go to war. So I don't care. Israel could do whatever the hell they want. They're not going to ask me for my advice. I'm just giving analysis, saying the purpose of a unity government would probably be to carry out the annexation. And if Israel carries out the annexation, the likelihood of a regional war is pretty high. So to me, the unity government basically means war.
Well, I don't think the unity government is going to do annexation.
As an Israeli, you could say, like, fuck yeah, like, let's do it. Like, let's do the annexation and let's send Iran, God forbid, back to the Stone Age and get this over with. Like, let's do it. I mean, is that what you're saying, Aaron?
No, because I don't think the unity government means that.
Why would you have unity government if they're not going to war?
Because they want your boys. They want to strap boots on your boys, give them a gun.
We're saying the purpose of the unity government is just to force the Kratom into the army, and once that's done, they could dissolve and have new elections. So all they need to do, the unity government,
secular super pissed at the religious,
and then they could dissolve the government and have new elections after that's been done.
I don't. They want to piss off the religious. They're really angry at them.
So we have a unity government with let's say Netanyahu's finished and Likud forces him out. Then you have a unity government of blue and white at the head, Likud without Netanyahu, and Yisrael Beitenu. And they force the legislation through, and then it's done forever. Kratom are no exemption for military service anymore. And once that's done, they called for new elections and see what happens and turn the democracy back to the people. That's what you think would happen?
Well, democracy is with the people with a unity government. I don't see how the democracy disappeared. But this is the number one issue. I can't see an issue higher than this.
Unity government's not democracy to the people. Unity government is saying that unity government's for an emergency situation. The will of the people is to have a leftist or rightist government. You can't govern with a unity government, because how could you govern with a joint leftist rightist government?
If it was the will of the people to have a right-wing government, they would have voted like I did. So obviously it wasn't their will. They doubled Lieberman's mandates, and they knew exactly what Lieberman's will. They knew what he wanted to do, and he's doing it. He's going to get it done. It's going to be unity government or nothing.
Well, no, I'm saying Lieberman could put the Arabs in the coalition.
Nah,
blue and white and the Arabs.
Israelis are too racist. We're too racist for that.
I mean, there's two possibilities. One is that the Haredim could join the left, or the Arabs.
But Lieberman wouldn't join. Then he wouldn't have enough people.
Lieberman won't join with the Arabs?
No. He'll lose her respectability. So will blue and white. Nobody was going to join the Arabs. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, so blue and white.
In the rhetoric, it should happen the way they speak, but in actuality, it's not going to happen.
But I was saying blue and white could team up with the Haredim, and then they don't need Lieberman.
With the eight, yeah, they would have, but then they would have to join in with the Arabs.
With blue and white, Shas, United Torah Judaism, Labor, and the other one, they still need Lieberman.
I have to find out, but
United Torah Judaism, I don't think they need the Arabs or Lieberman.
But what about Lapid? He's also just like Lieberman. He wants the Haredim to join the army. So I don't think that's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, God forbid.
You're a nice tribe, but like it's not going to.
Politician, if some rabbi lets him have sex with his daughter, what does he care? He'll cave in on his values.
No, I mean, you lose your whole respectability. I think that Lapid's.
I mean, Lapid's a corrupt politician. Like whatever, if some honey trap lets him do what he wants to do, he'll cave in on his values.
Okay, David, I'll give that a 2% likelihood. You happy?
That you, as an Israeli, you agree that if some rabbi let Lapid bang his daughter, that he might allow the Haredim into.
I agree that the religious are whores. I agree with that. They're not nationalistic, and they just want money for their communities, and they could give a damn about the country. So your scenario actually makes sense.
Yeah, I think than money. In my opinion, Lapid was more corruptible by women than money.
Right, and the religious are more corruptible. You just give money to their communities. Give them money to the yeshiva, to the mikvot, and then they
15 kids. All he's got to do is sacrifice his daughter. One of his 10 daughters. Just find some rabbi with a pretty daughter to sacrifice to Lapid.
Yeah, it's pretty straight-laced, so good luck. But whatever. I don't think it has to do with this goes with your mind again. Your mind goes off into these tangents that are pretty impressive. But it's not about sexuality here. I know that's what you're concerned about. But
well, I was saying Lapid. I said Lapid is more corruptible by women than money.
More corruptible by women than money?
Yeah, that's my opinion. Is that if like Lapid getting bribed by millions of dollars would mean less to him than Lapid getting to bang a bunch of women.
He's a good-looking guy. He doesn't need to be bribed with women. If he wants it, he can get it.
No, but he can't be.
You know?
Yeah, but I'm saying the rabbi, like, Israel's corrupt. I say, like, Shas in United Torah Judaism would turn a blind eye and let Lapid get away with that if they joined the coalition and Lapid agreed to continue the status quo. And, like, Lapid might be enough of a pervert that he's too busy banging these women to be clamping down on the kratom.
I haven't seen evidence of Lapid being a pervert.
Lapid's grandfather was a Rebbe. Like, his cousins, the Salisher Rebbe, that Lapid's cousins were praying at the grave of his grandfather, the Salisher Rebbe.
Do you think it's impossible for other people to have ideals that they can hold to?
I don't think so. I mean, it's possible, but I don't think Lapid's such a man of ideals. Like, I think his ego could be stroked, and some people, it's like, okay, name your poison, and in my impression, Lapid's poison is loose women.
Where do you get that idea from? He's not a swinger.
Yeah, but I just see them like the way he acts with women. Like he looks like the type guy who fashions himself a ladies' man, and if he had some rabbi's daughter in his entourage, doing the nasty, I think that would change him.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But does it always go back to like shiksas and fucking shiksas?
People have different vices. It's saying Lapid's vice is probably eroticism.
This is your charm, Duvid.
Duvid, if I got you like a blonde whore, would you feel better? Like that's a hooker? Like literally a hooker. Would that be cool? No,
that's not my vice. I'm saying Lapid. That's
okay.
Like the bad.
No evidence
that might be your vice, but like different people have their different vices. That's not my vice, thank God. Like I have vices, like everyone has vices. Like erotics, sensual sin is the vice of all men. But some people have different levels of different vices. Searching like Luke Ford or a lot of people in the Luke Ford whack pack, that's their vice.
What makes you think that Lapid's vice is women?
Just you see the pictures with him and like the women in his coalition. And he's always got like his arm around women when he appears in public. Like he likes to be flanked by pretty women.
Yeah, I'm gonna Google your ear Lapid and see the pictures. See what he's talking about. Oh, I don't see any women. See him shaking hands with the rabbi. Does that mean that he's going to be like having sex with the rabbi?
I mean, he is married.
Yeah, he's married for a long time. He has a autistic daughter. His wife is involved in autistic causes. Real autism, not internet autism like you. And
would he have a retarded kid or something?
He's got an autistic daughter that doesn't speak.
Lapid has a retarded daughter.
I see one picture on the bottom of Lapid when he's like 20 with a girl. Otherwise, no girls. You have these fantasies. Dude, you realize you make up a world in your own mind. Do you know that?
And do you think the right was like that? That's why Ayelet Shaked rose to power.
Here we go.
Probably Bennett was more weaker than Lapid.
What happened? What happened with Bennett and Ayelet Shaked? They did something.
It's like, let's put the pretty woman in charge. Like no one likes Bennett.
Well, Bennett kind of wasn't inspiring, and it turned out that Ayala Chiquette isn't either. I knew that from the get-go. I don't think she's an inspiring person. She's pretty in picture, but actually, when you see her live, she looks horrible. She's not a good-looking person up live.
But isn't she the head of a party with like 7 seats?
Yeah, she just, but she separated from that. So now she's on her own with Bennett again. And she was supposed to bring in like 4 or 5 new seats. They're supposed to have like 9 to 11 seats, not 7. So she failed. Anyway.
Yeah, Civil War, like, it's unclear. Like I was mentioning on Claire's stream, the divergence between group strategy, because I was saying, genetically, blue and white in the United Towards Judaism are basically the same people genetically, but they've chosen a different group strategy, and the group strategy has reached, like, Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, even though they had severe machloikus, were close enough together that they said the children of Beis Hillel would still marry the children of Beis Shammai. Or, Beis Shammai was more strict, but the children of Beis Shammai would not oppose if one of their kids married the children of Beis Hillel. So even though Lapid and Gantz are basically 100% Ashkenazic Jews, they have the exact same DNA as United Torah Judaism, their group strategy has diverged so much that they can't. Well, it's true. But you would see that there's not a DNA difference between the Ashkenazic Jews in Israel and the Haredim. Like Netanyahu, Lapid, and Gantz have 100% Ashkenazic blood.
How do you account for Lapid's dark eyes?
Well,
he has to go with us.
Yeah, it's only like most Jews don't. It's a minority of Ashkenazic Jews that have blue eyes. I'm saying, like, you don't have to have blue eyes to be an Ashkenazic Jew.
Ah, okay. So how do they recognize one another? How do they differentiate the shot between United Torah?
Lapid's grandfather was a Hasidic Rebbe.
Yeah, in Romania, right?
Yeah, like, these guys are 100% Ashkenazic Jews.
Mm-hmm.
They're not genetically different. That's what I'm saying. They have a different group strategy, but they're not. It's like.
Don't you see the difference between a Polish Jew and a Russian Jew and a Romanian Jew and a Czechoslovakian Jew? And I kind of do, being in Israel.
I'm not saying there's no difference, but I'm saying there's not a difference between United Torah Judaism and your various factions in blue and white of the Ashkenazic Jews. Like, DNA-wise, they're basically the same. Okay, Vishnitz. It's like, okay, what's the difference between Vishnitz and Mir Yeshiva and the Litvak area? There's a difference, and it's the same thing. Okay, Lapid is Hungarian, and Netanyahu's is from Russia, or Gantz, or whether he's Polish. It's the same thing as the difference between United Torah Judaism.
Because they have that mix too, but maybe that's just too wide of a group. I mean, it's
not like Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. There's no intermarriage. Like, you can't intermarry. The kid of United Torah Judaism can't marry the kid of someone from blue and white, or even someone from Likud.
They won't even marry between, like, Chabad and Satmar or whatever, Litvin. Like, they won't even marry between each other's sex.
Yeah, so I said the dispute in Israel is not like you have the divergence between American Jews and Israeli Jews, where American Jews have largely allowed intermarriage and are multicultural. So in Israel, the dispute between the similar genetic Jews is not about multiculturalism and immigration. It's about secularism in the army or being Haredi. But even the secular pro-army people, their dispute, like, they're not for multiculturalism and immigration. They're just for having a military state that's secular.
Well, if I were to take your racial grouping seriously, I feel like I immediately have an affinity towards Polish Jews more than Russian Jews. Or, like, if somebody says they're a Romanian Jew, then I immediately understand the distance. Like, and then with a Polish Jew, I connect much easier.
Yeah, I could see that, but we could talk about that. But I'm saying I was just making the point that genetically, your Israeli secular Ashkenazic Jews and your Israeli Haredi Jews are genetically the same, and they're not disagreeing about intermarriage, because intermarriage in Israel is like between Jews and non-Jews is like less than 5%, and even intermarriage between
They're go up.
is like 25-30%. So even the majority of marriages in Israel among secular Jews are between fellow Ashkenazic Jews.
Well, I think you're a little bit off, because it's like my wife and in Babylonian Hebrew, they're half Jews too, because they're half Sephardic and half Ashkenazi, and that's quite common in Israeli.
Yeah, but it's like 25-30%.
Well,
The majority of secular Ashkenazic Jews, like 70% of them, marry fellow Ashkenazic secular Jews.
you think that's true? How do you know that's true?
I looked at the surveys. You might have to look at the exact data, but when saying like Israel has measured this data, it's not like you don't need to hypothesize about it. You probably
I mean, I see tons of Sephardic and Ashkenazi mix where you don't fit at all with the religious.
well, yeah, it's like 1 out of 4. But by saying a secular Jew that is Ashkenazi that marries a Sephardi or Mizrahi is like 25% of the case, but that still means well over 50% of secular Ashkenazi Jews marry fellow secular Ashkenazi Jews.
I mean, if your theory is correct to begin with, by your standards, the Labor and Likud should always make a unity government because they're both Ashkenazi Jews.
No, because they've had a divergent group strategy. Even though they're genetically the same, it's not like Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai anymore. The group strategy between the secularists and the religion has diverged so much that even though they share the same genetics, like Lapid, even though Lapid has 100% the same genetics as your average Hasidic Jew in Vishnitz, it doesn't matter. They're too divergent. The similar genetics between him and Hasidim from Romania doesn't matter. Like they've already diverged too much. Or you think Lapid could just put a strimal back on, and because he's got that genetics, like doesn't matter. He just pop a strimal back on, and I'll be happy again.
He doesn't divorce himself from Judaism completely. He identifies himself as a Jew for sure,
but he foresees a secular, strong Jewish state where the Orthodox are possibly a protected minority, but a small stake minority in the future of Israel.
You know who got along to begin with was Ben and Lapid. They're called brothers. The coalition, they called it the Brotherhood. And so that was the religious and the secular getting along and making a coalition. You hear a lot from Lapid. You don't get the sense that he's anti-religious or anti-Torah or anti-Jewish at all.
Why say anti-Jewish?
His father was for sure, but I think he identifies. I think he even searches out some sort of Torah meaning in his life.
It's what his speech that he gave when he first started his party, that he says he lost. He admits that the Haredim won and his father lost.
But he said that to the national religious.
Yeah, he gave that famous speech. I mean, I saw like a translation of it. Right. With a translation where he says we lost. The battle with the Haredim was
not the Haredim. He lost to the national religious. But I don't think that's so true. I think that it looks like that's where things were headed. But who knows where we're headed right now? And I think that you fear some sort of turmoil that will lead to a different place in Israel that you're not sure about. You want to be sure.
You're psychoanalyzing me when I'm just trying to analyze Israeli politics.
Right, because it brings you to an extreme place that nobody would go to. So you'd have to ask yourself why. Why would Duva do that? And that would be my answer. That you want security about where Israel is now, and you want security about what America is now, and you don't want the two to change. and they're both are more dynamic than you thought that they might be.
I function pretty well under distance. Like, I'm saying I probably would actually prefer, let's just get it over with. I'm saying, like, I don't think I'm not scared. Like if Israel turns into a military state and they're going to expel God forbid, the Arabs and start bombing the hell out of Iran, like, I'm not scared of you.
You're afraid that you might miss the boat. I don't think you have.
Yeah, so are you scared if Israel turns into a military state, expels the Arabs, and starts bombing the hell out of Syria, Iran, and Lebanon?
It's not going to happen. We don't have that type of public. We're too involved. We're too educated.
You want that to happen. Like, say, if that happened, you would kind of be pleasantly surprised, right?
Right. Then you would win. Right. Then you would smile and go, look at Aaron and my idiot brother that 20 years ago made the wrong decision and I made the right decision. That's what you want.
You don't want Israel to expel the Arabs and to bomb the hell out of Syria, Iran, and Lebanon?
In this context, no. I want us to win. I think that status quo is the winning ticket.
You can't win with status quo. You just
yeah.
And that's what you're saying. Like, if eventually you're going to have to expel the Arabs, God forbid, and bomb the hell out of Iran, Syria, and Lebanon, the sooner the better.
Why? Nobody had to expel black people from Park Slope, Brooklyn. They just got gentrified. So we can gentrify or Jewify Israel in the same manner.
No, you can't, because it's saying you weren't able to. You just have a protected, small, gentrified area, and then you have the same black people living in project housing right around the corner from you. That's not what Israel wants. They don't want to have project housing of Palestinians all over the place. They want to expel them. Like, the surveys are very clear. I went over this with Babs on my channel. Over 50% of Israelis are in favor of expulsion of the Arabs.
Yeah, but it would be a political disaster.
That's why you need a military coup, because Israelis want that. Like, there's no
military is boring. The military has no imagination.
Of Israel getting what they want is the parliament, is the government. So if the military just took over, then
Are you sure it's not the Supreme Court?
Well, yeah, they'd have to dissolve.
I'd say the Supreme Court is probably one of the biggest obstructions to giving the Israeli people what they want.
Yes,
but they'll work hand in hand, the Supreme Court and the military and the Congress.
And then they could do what the Israelis want, and the Israelis might even support it.
No.
Because the military is much more respected institute in Israel than the Supreme Court.
Actually, the Supreme Court, I would say, has more power than the military lately.
Yeah, but I'm saying the military, polling-wise, is by far the most respected institute in all of Israel, much more respected than the Supreme Court. So if the military took power and dissolved the Supreme Court and Parliament, those aren't that popular in Israel anyways.
But the military is the Supreme Court's bitch.
Yeah, so that's why I'm saying a military coup where they dissolve the Parliament and the Supreme Court would probably be pretty popular among your average Israeli.
No, because the Supreme Court would still be in power. Because
not if they dissolve. If somehow the military takes over and dissolves the Parliament,
it would have to be a hard takeover, is what you're talking about, basically.
You're fired. There is no Supreme Court.
Even with a hard takeover, who would they put in judiciary seats?
They wouldn't. They just dissolve it.
Same shitty leftists that we have this.
So it would become a military dictatorship, like many of the countries in the Arab world.
Yeah, exactly. They just send those people home.
Dude, I wish Israelis still had balls like that. If it wasn't for all the freaking Ashkenazi washing, maybe they would. But nope, no. They've become subjugated by their own internal shackles and fetters that were constrained upon them by Europeans during the Enlightenment.
Like, Aaron's wife probably would hear me talking, and she'd be like, I actually agree with Duvid. It's Aaron's inner goy that's scared.
I don't think you understand the military. It's not.
Tell me your wife, if all of a sudden the military took over, they dissolved the Supreme Court, said you're fired, your service isn't needed anymore, that your wife would be like, no, I think that's a pretty bad idea. Like, it's your inner goy that's scared.
The generals are still leftists, and they love the Supreme Court. They would never harm them. They wouldn't harm a hair on their head.
They're just going to fire him and send him home. Say your service is no longer needed.
Why? Well, they're not the people that you think that they are. They're leftists. They're Ashkenazi leftists. Why would that turn out the way you're saying it would?
Because then they could do what the Israeli public wants. The Israeli public wants an
If they wanted that, they would have voted in a.
What's stopping Israel from doing
government?
Israel wants to expel the Arabs and to annex all of Israel and to bomb the hell out of Iran, Syria, and Lebanon. What the hell is stopping them from doing it?
The only party that explicitly says this is the party I voted for, and it didn't pass the threshold by
but the polling shows that that's extremely popular among Israelis.
Not popular enough to vote for a party over it.
Yeah, but if there was
a popularity
that they would be like that they wouldn't be so concerned. There's not going to be so much protest in the streets if you dissolve the Supreme Court and send them home. There's not going to be thousands of people of Israelis that would protest that they have to, put the Supreme Court back.
If the world would look another way, we would love to boot them out of our country.
The Supreme Court.
But I don't think that in a vacuum the average Israeli also would want to be like bellicose and expansionist towards Syria, Lebanon, and Iran.
Expansion, just to bomb the hell out of them.
I don't even think they would necessarily want to bomb the hell out of them. I think they'd sooner want to say, okay, let's come to the table and sit down and hammer this out all in for once. Like you think our existence is legitimate. Okay, if you think our existence is illegitimate and you're going to try to attack our sovereignty, then we'll do the same to you. Unless you want to they're going to talk about it like men. You know what I mean? Which the current Israelis won't do because they're too busy trying to play this this deceptive Netanyahu BS of buy time, kick the can down the road type shit of we'll kick down the can down the road, and in the meantime basically being incredibly unfair to these Arab people and keeping them in a quasi citizen state, and being unfair to the Israeli populace who deserves to have full sovereignty and rulership over their indigenous land. So
the sooner the better. It's worse for the Arabs, it's worse for Israel. And saying, okay, if Iran lets you expel the Arabs without doing anything, maybe you don't have to bomb the hell out of them. But chances are, if they expel the Arabs, there's going to be regional war, and Israel's going to have to bomb the hell out of, at least Syria, Lebanon, and Iran, possibly more.
Who wants that?
Well, yeah, you would like to be able to, God forbid, expel the Arabs and have no repercussions.
God forbid. Listen, I have to say something that you're both seeing this as Americans. So Israelis aren't so wrapped up in the Arab AQ, we're not so worried about the Arabs, but we are wanting to stick it to the religious. This is a much higher priority to us than the Arabs. And you're not getting that.
If you expelled the Arabs, would you still need the Kuwait? The only reason you need them in the army is to maintain the occupation. But if you expelled those Arabs, you wouldn't need to have the Haredim in the military in the first place. In fact, you could send the Haredim to the West Bank and just have them out of the way.
No one's sending anybody to anywhere.
That's the plan. You annex the West Bank, and then you just pump all the Haredim there.
Yeah. Well, actually, we are doing that.
Yeah, they're already doing that.
Yeah, all the new settlements are places that Bnei Brak and Mea Shearim can't hold because they won't allow those communities to build up. So then they ship them out to settlement.
But they need to expel the Arabs.
No, there's still room, and they're finding places to stick them. My daughter goes to one of these places.
Your daughter's in a joint Arab-Israeli school?
No, she's in a Jewish yeshuv that's mostly Haredi. Half Haredi and half Dati Leumi. And it's a fenced off, it's Kokak Yikov, it's a fenced off place completely, and you have to take a bus through Arab towns, I guess.
So I mean, you wouldn't prefer to just have those Arabs expelled, or you're happy with the situation?
Oh, I would love them to go. I would like to see them go so badly. But we understand that there's
You'd be willing to risk war with Iran, Syria, and Lebanon to have them go. Like if you forcefully just expelled those people and pushed them into Jordan, and and took the in the likelihood that Iran would launch war against you if they did that, and you say you would take that risk.
But I see a better way. I see the status quo being effective, and all you have to do is more status quo and more.
Why have the status quo? If you could expel the Arabs and have the military running the government in full preparation for all-out war should it be needed, why would you want to continue the status quo when it's less likely that
do this without all that? Who wants their sons to blow up, from missiles from Syria?
Because if you're going to expel the Arabs, the longer you wait, the harder it's going to be. So, like, if God forbid you think there's any chance you're going to be able to expel the Arabs, it gets worse with time.
Why? Like, if you look at Jerusalem for the last 40 years, we've been successful in multiplying our population and keeping the other population in check. So all we have to do is more of that. Like, if we had more policies where it's easier to buy into East Jerusalem, then we can, and it would draw like higher prices organically.
How many
Arabs would love to take the money of an Israeli Jew.
How many Arab Israeli citizens were there when Israel formed?
How many Arab citizens? I don't know. I'd have to look. I'm not a Mr.
It was like 400,000, and now it's like 4 million. I mean, now it's like 2 million.
In Jerusalem, there's only 800,000 total with Arabs. So
how many Arabs are there in Jerusalem? Like 400,000?
I think it's 200 or 300. I'd have to look it up.
How many was it in 1949? It was like 30,000.
Okay, no, they're increasing, but the averages are increasing on our side. Like, we have more percentage of Jews today than we did 50 years ago, for sure.
But it's only Haredim. The Arabs are increasing faster than.
No. Haredim live in their own little neighborhoods, and there's many secular neighborhoods in Jerusalem.
When you say that the Israelis are increasing faster than the Arabs, that's only the Haredim. Without the Haredim, the Arabs are increasing faster than the Israelis.
No, because we have the migration, we have Aliyah, and the secular Jews aren't any slouches with making babies. They do a pretty good replacement level.
The Arabs have a higher birth rate than the secular Israelis.
Well, they're reduced every year. They reduced. They're pretty low at the present time. They're 2.6.
I don't think you could argue the point that God forbid expulsion of the Arabs gets harder. It gets less and less likely with time.
Why? East Jerusalem is a weaker.
One thing is the pure numbers. So the first reason why expulsion of the Arab is less likely with time is the pure numbers, that the Arab population of Israeli citizen keeps on increasing.
One of my first experiences in Israel, like 23 years ago, was taking a bus in an Arab bus filled with Arabs. And more than one Arab would come up to me and go, "What's your information in America? How can I get in contact with you?" And because they all wanted to come to America. So the majority of Arabs in Israel would love to leave if they had the opportunity to.
Yeah, but they don't want to leave to refugee camps in Jordan.
Right. So if they have an apartment,
if all of the American Jews would give up our U.S. citizenship and it could be transferred to Palestinians, it might be okay. But to force them into Jordan and then Jordan to reject them and put them into refugee camps, that they're not interested in.
But think more gentrification rather than expulsion. So
gentrification meaning that you're going to build.
So you mean keep kicking the can down the road and have this like increasingly aggrieved foreign population who perceives themselves to be the indigenous inhabitants in your land and is going to basically do whatever it takes. I don't know. What exactly are you talking about here? Like, are you talking? I don't know. Explain.
Well, you see the dynamics in Brooklyn, right? It used to be a completely black neighborhood. Now it's a white neighborhood.
Yeah, and that's why religious can't walk down the street with getting their ass kicked, because like most people can't afford to live in the gentrified areas that are safe, and that's why religious Jews are scared to walk the street because God forbid some dark-skinned person is going to beat the hell out of them. It's basically what Israelis are scared of. Like, that if there weren't the fences and mandatory military service, that your kids wouldn't be safe to go to school.
I wasn't talking about Crown Heights. I was talking about Park Slope. Park Slope doesn't have.
Most people can't afford to live in Park Slope.
Right, but they could when it was starting to gentrify.
No, I'm saying gentrification is only for a minority of the population.
No, it starts off to be a cheap deal for the brave, and then it becomes
it makes the cost of living out of reach of the majority of people, including whites and Jews.
Yeah, but we got the money. Like, we're spending.
You might. I mean, say I don't even think you have money. Babs might have money, but your average Jew does not have enough money to survive.
Yeah, they do. They do. The average Jew has the money to buy out the Arabs. The average
in New York, the average Jew cannot survive gentrification. The average Jew is going to be on the black side of gentrification.
No, because maybe they're going to be the first ones.
No, but I'm telling you the fact that the average Jew is going to be on the black side of gentrification in New York. Is that not the case, Babs?
What do you mean by the black side of gentrification? You mean that they will be against gentrification?
No, I'm saying that gentrification makes the property extremely expensive.
On the black side. Oh, sorry. I thought you were meaning black. Like on the black side, as in like profiting from it. Yes.
Yeah, but that they're pushing the blacks out of these gentrified areas to create these little urban utopias. And I'm saying that your average Jew is on the black side of that. They're not going to be part of this urban utopia.
Wrong.
Even
So
Babs himself is scared that
at the beginning of gentrification.
Babs, even you yourself are scared that you're going to be on the black side of gentrification, that you're not going to be able to afford to stay in the urban utopia.
Well, not so much not even be afford to stay, but it's like, will I be able to afford to be in Hudson Yards versus, like stay on the, exactly. Or like Brookfield Place or whatever, these new pseudo neighborhoods for like these Chinese property investor multimillionaires. I mean, yeah, sure. Although I think that,
but if you weren't working your ass off,
I mean, this is really more like post gentrification. Like the phenomenon that you're talking about is kind of like this post gentrification steel and glass type thing.
If you weren't working your ass off, you're not even talking about like you're not going to be able to afford to live in the WASP and elite Jewish area of the gentrification. You're going to be living with Mansour in like the Chinese Asian part of gentrification. But you're saying like no, like you might your company, your job might not work out. You might run through your inheritance, and you're going to be on the black side of gentrification, scared you're getting your ass kicked just for walking down the street.
Yeah, this is the like what I describe as like the Elysium duality, where if you've ever seen the film Elysium, basically, some like my worst fear, and I'm not sure if this actually is the case, but that we're headed towards this kind of like Elysium world where you have these steel and glass sequestered areas like Brookfield Place and Hudson Yards, basically, and then you have everything else in the world, basically, and that ranges all the way from like, from Middle America to like the ghettos of New York, the project.
Make the cut.
Yeah, I think I worry about that. That's partially my neurosis, but yeah, it's a reasonable concern for I think a lot of like formerly like upper middle class and even like lower upper class people are feeling the crunch of it.
But dude,
let alone in Israel.
The poor Jew can still be where he is, like the Dimona, the Sderot, whatever. There's always they're in these neighborhoods now. They don't need to be touched. So, but meanwhile, you have these opportunities where an Arab has a house that if he sells to an Arab, he gets 200,000 shekels, but they open up to the Israeli market and he can get 1 million shekels. You can, quadruple or quintuple is money. So the only thing that's stopping this from happening is legislation right now. And it's fair legislation. All it would say is that a Jew has a right to buy this property as much as an Arab does. And that seems very fair to me. Meanwhile, you'd have like young families that have like not a lot of money with these opportunities to give, like maybe go to an Arab neighborhood and say, yeah, buy your place that you would get 200,000 shekels for. I'll give you 400,000 shekels. Meanwhile, if you took that, you try to buy an Israeli apartment in an Israeli settlement, that would cost them 1 million or 1.5 million shekels. So him and his friends could, if they're brave enough, they would find a good deal. And just like the first white people going in the Park Slope. It seemed like a fearful thing at first, and then the few white people that were in there showed them that it wasn't such a danger, and then more moved in until it just turned into a white neighborhood.
I don't think you know what you're talking about. I mean, I think all across America, every major Jewish establishment is in the black section of town, and it's the vast minority of Jews that make it into the gentrified area. Like it's only the 1% or the 10%, the very wealthy Jews that could afford to live in that area, and almost the major Jewish section of every single town across America is in the black section of town.
How did it come that way, though? How did it become an expensive neighborhood? At one point, it wasn't. You have to agree with that. That's simple math.
Yeah, I was saying, but your average Jew is not going to make it into that neighborhood. They're going to be in the black section of town.
Religious Jews have no guts. They don't have any guts. That's why.
Well, or their earning potential is not actually that high.
No, because it's the same thing with my building. Like I'm just like a step away from the old city, and I'm really super close to walking to the wall. It should be a prime place for the religious to move into, but they don't, because it's not the first religious or the first 10 religious families to do it. They don't have any guts to do it solo. It's just to strike out and be brave by themselves. And the religious national religious hardly have that spirit in them. They have that spirit a little bit. But I'm sure if a deal's a deal, and if a few brave Israelis can show you that it's not so bad to live in an Arab neighborhood, it could become a thing quite quickly. And it is in many respects. Like Yaffo is pretty much an Israeli place right now, so it used to be all Arab. Haifa used to be a completely or more than half Arab, and now it's 5% Arab. Actually, 15% with the Christians. So it's not like you don't pull these things out of nowhere. It's possibilities.
I was saying, Israel, in America, you're not going to be able to get gentrification. Does not force the larger population into ghettos. It leaves the majority of the city lower class, lower middle class, and creates a little urban utopia that's gentrified. In Israel, they might be able to force the Arabs into a ghetto, as opposed to in America, where they've basically taken over the city and hollowed out a very selective area that's urban utopias. I mean, that's not the similar case in Israel, where they might be able to force all the Arabs into a ghetto.
Well, I mean, it's not so true. I mean, Babs would know more than me, but when I left New York, it looked like everything in Brooklyn was becoming gentrified.
I don't know. Geographically, the gentrified areas are like 2% of New York City, as opposed to they're not. I mean, you're mentioning Brooklyn Heights or something, even Upper East Side or something. The gentrified areas of New York City represent 2% of it, as opposed to the vast majority. In Detroit, Detroit's 90 square miles, and you have maybe a 2 square mile area that has been gentrified, and the rest of it is that's in Haifa. So if Israel has its wishes, they might be able to force the Arabs into smaller and smaller areas, and but in America, that's not a possibility.
Okay, I just want to quickly explain the New York gentrification thing. So the way I see it is, there is an initial wave of gentrification, and this is the wave of gentrification that made Williamsburg what it is today. That made this is the gentrification that some Jewish landlords were taking part in, some kind of mom and pop landlords. Of course banks like Citigroup as well, but they're sort of the stage one gentrification. And then more recently, in the last 5 to 10 years, there's been increasingly this thing that I call stage two gentrification, or post gentrification almost. And that's kind of Brookfield Place, Hudson Yards, the steel and glass condos that appear on the coast, of Brooklyn and Queens.
You're talking about less than a square mile in New York, but it's the masses of the underclass that still represent geographically the majority. And even those gentrified areas, they're only a few hundred feet away from the poor people.
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's another interesting thing about how things work out, especially with the way the housing projects are. It's like, it's kind of these giant buildings that can't be demolished. They'll be
The
almost
Upper East
every
Side, you're only a few hundred, like the Upper East
Yeah,
Side.
exactly. You have the most extreme wealth right next to the most extreme poverty. Yeah.
Even you're only a few hundred feet away from the poor people.
Oh, of course. I mean, there's nowhere in New York City where you aren't really thinking about it.
But these are
in Haifa, they could slowly force the Arabs into a smaller and smaller section of town. Like in Jerusalem,
wouldn't something like that breed immense resentment, though? I mean,
that's what's happening in Israel. Saying in America, there isn't the power to force the poor people into smaller and smaller section of towns. So the elite in the gentrified area have just accepted that they're going to have a tiny fraction of the downtown that they are safe in, and it's a big risk everywhere else in the city, as opposed to Israel, where they could force the non-Jewish population into a smaller and smaller section of town year after year. Like in Haifa, what's happening with the third generation land ownership, or whatever the contract where the Arabs were allowed to keep the land for 3 generations, and now the third generation is coming up, and they're going to be able to force the Arabs off the property into a smaller section of town, or like in Jerusalem, where they keep on taking land away from Arabs. And so the section of town controlled by the Arabs is relatively rapidly, not rapidly, but it's decreasing, as where New York City, the land of the masses of the underclass is not decreasing, it's actually increasing. In fact, the gentrification of the middle class, like white upper middle class areas in New York, are actually shrinking.
To me, it seems like the poor in New York are it's an artificial thing. Like if legislation didn't say we want poor people to be in New York, those poor people, most of those poor people won't be there. So all Israel has to do by comparison is just not artificially keep the Arabs inside Israel.
Well, that's what I'm saying. What you guys are doing is ghettoizing the Arabs. That's not what gentrification in America is doing. It's not ghettoizing. It's actually ghettoizing the rich people. I mean, gentrification is the exact opposite of what's happening in Israel, because in Israel, you're gentrifying, you're ghettoizing the Arabs and forcing them into a smaller and smaller section of the town and secluding that area, as opposed to in America, it's the rich people who are being ghettoized into a smaller and smaller section of town.
So far, 30,000 Arabs left Gaza.
Babs? It's you guys who are being put into a ghetto, as opposed to in Israel, it's the poor people, it's the Arabs that are being put into a ghetto, as opposed to in New York, it's the rich people that are being put into a ghetto.
I think your problem is that you're not looking the map at the way it is. The map is just a small, tiny little Israel surrounded by Arab countries. And like if 30,000 Arabs leave Gaza in 1 year, if that happens after 10 years, that's like at least a third, if not more, of their population leaving. And they're not leaving in smaller ghettos, they're leaving to different countries.
They're not leaving. It's a bigger population of Arabs are being forced into a smaller geographic area. So if you're talking...
No, Gaza Arabs are leaving.
Arabs in Jerusalem has not decreased, it's increased, but they've been forced into a smaller geographic area, even though their numbers have increased. As opposed to the U.S., it's the rich people who have been forced into a smaller geographic area.
Again, I don't think that you're taking into account the option of the Arabs just taking their money and finding a different country.
But that's not what's happening.
It's just like 30,000 Arabs here.
Are you disagreeing with the facts? In your family, Arabs are leaving. That's not what's happening. The population of Arabs in these cities is increasing, although they are being forced into a smaller geographic region.
It's not true. They're not increasing. They're decreasing. And they go off into bigger areas. They go off into these villages in the Yehuda and Shomron. So and they find new territories and they build illegally. And the Bedouins in the south are expanding. So it's a lie to say that they're losing or they're shrinking land mass to build on. the dynamic, which I don't know why you refuse to recognize, is that many thousands and thousands of Arabs leave the country, and that's a good option.
Oh, I'm just looking on Wikipedia. The number of Muslims, I mean, here it doesn't have Arabs, it says Muslims in Jerusalem in 1987 was 121,000. The number today in 2016 is 319,000. So in 1987, 121,000 Arabs had a lot more geographic control of Jerusalem, and now you have 320,000 Arabs that have a smaller geographic control. I mean, I'll pop up the demographics of Haifa too. It's going to be the same thing.
Okay, but how many Jews were in 1987? And now we have 500,000 Jews. So I think there's probably like 100,000. So their 3 times increase was our 5 times increase, if those numbers are correct.
I'm not comparing them against the Jews. I'm telling you that the Arab populations in the major cities of Israel are increasing, although they're being forced into a smaller geographic area, even though their numbers are increasing. I don't know what you don't understand about this.
No, but I mean,
look at Haifa. The numbers are
East Jerusalem hasn't shrunk. They never had access to West Jerusalem, so it's not shrinking. They're just okay. I'll grant you that they triple the size in the same landmass. I'll give you that. What's the point? If Israel is out populating Jerusalem and outbuilding the Arabs, then we're winning.
If you're looking at geographically the area controlled by darker skinned people in New York City, that's increasing.
I can't really talk about New York City.
If you're looking in Israel, the area controlled by darker skinned people, by Arabs, is decreasing, even though their population is increasing.
I mean, how do you know that's true?
Exactly what I'm saying. I mean, you can't acknowledge the fact of what I'm saying. The Arab population in Israel in the major cities is increasing. There's no way for you to say, no, David, you're wrong. The Arab populations in the major cities in Israel is decreasing.
Not in Haifa and Tel Aviv, and these are bigger cities than Jerusalem.
The Arab population in Tel Aviv is also increasing.
No, this I reject. I don't think that would be true. And if they increased, then they increased marginally. And in Haifa, I know they decreased, at least since 1948, for sure.
I'm putting here in the chat. I mean, here's the numbers on Jerusalem. I mean, probably Tel Aviv probably has.
All the major cities are, except for Jerusalem, are almost completely Israeli. Like Haifa and Tel Aviv, Netanya, Nariya, Beersheba, Afula, all these are completely Israeli. And anyway, as I said before, it's not even the major concern with most Israelis.
7,000 Arabs living in Haifa now, out of a population of close to 1 million. Arabs are about 25% of Haifa.
That's not the statistic I was used to. I remember looking up that there's 15%, and 10% of those are Christian Arabs.
I'm looking at me. Wikipedia says that there's 237,200 Arabs living in Haifa.
They're counting wide Haifa, not Haifa itself. Like there's a huge stretch. It's like the difference between the tri-state area and New York City. They're including a lot of surrounding Arab villages. Anyway, yeah, as I said before, it's not Israelis' main concern. It's a concern. It's definitely a big deal. But what we really want to do is to put the hurt on your religious boys. And that's what this whole dynamic is about. It's not about Arabs. I hate to say. I know the world wants us to obsess over the Arab and Israeli conflict, but to us, it's not as big of a deal as other factors inside.
According to the Israel's Central Bureau of Statistics, there's almost 1.9 million Arabs in Israel now.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, the 25% of the population. But I think that was the case to begin with. I think when we first absorbed them, they were 25%.
Yeah, when you first absorbed them, there's like 400,000. Now there's 1.9 million.
Yeah, they increased and we increased. We're not very good at genocide, you know?
Well, so obviously expelling more people is more difficult.
I don't think expelling is only on the table in extreme circumstances, the kind of circumstances that nobody wants to live through. I don't want to live through it. Would you want to live through those circumstances just to get some Arabs out of your hair? When you're and in the end you're still living with a bunch of Jews that are annoying you all the time. You know, it's not like
if you're not going to go to war, why do you need the Haredim in the army?
Oh, it's a cultural thing. I'm with you. I think that they're not needed. I don't think that everybody needs to be conscripted.
So it's shmad. You're saying like the purpose is shmad.
It's to make you hurt. It's to make you hurt like we hurt.
The of inscription of the Israelis is shmad.
What is shmag? I don't know. Shma, like listen.
Shmad. Forceful secularization, like the Zionists did to the Spartan when they first came, into what they tried to do. Shmad. They tried to forcefully take the religious and turn them into secular Jews. I mean, shmad. That's the word, right? Shmad.
It is. And
you never heard of shmad, Babylon?
I don't think Babylon.
I know about the process. I'm more familiar with the sort of, I guess, Europeanization process of trying to mold them into the European new Jew rather than the de-religiousization process. Actually, from my opinion, seems second to the de-Mizrahification, de-Sephardification. Like the de-Levantization process seemed like the primary goal rather than de-religiousification, but the secularism was part of it, part of making them into secular, wannabe European nationalist style.
Yeah, so the purpose, that's the purpose of forcing the Haredim into the army, is to modernize them. It's not to...
Let's give them a little bit of credit. I mean, let's just keep it simple. So why is it fair for a secular son to go to war and a family to lose their son, but the religious family doesn't have to share that burden? That's just basics. So they have what to argue about. They have a legitimate complaint. And if this was the case to begin with, that not all Israelis are needed, they really just needed to make that case 20, 30 years ago when it was still true back then. Moshe Feiglin was making that case. He was the only guy that was saying that we don't need all these people in the army. It's just a tradition at this point. It's like a religion.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like Netanyahu, like Aaron is in the delusional side, and I don't think Gantz is delusional. Gantz probably is clear-eyed in what the reality of the situation, what the reality of the various policies are going to bring, as opposed to Aaron and the Netanyahu tendencies, who just have these delusions about infeasible dreams of theirs.
What? How did you do that? You don't recognize that a military coup is delusional?
No, military coup is very practical.
See, that's the thing. Like, that's what makes you, you know.
Well, I'm generally like a conspiracist or whatever. Like I'm alternative media because of the fake news and people telling you lies that people are thinking the obvious is not possible, and the fantasies and delusions are in reality. But facts are facts. And military dictatorship is actually very likely, and your Netanyahu fantasies of the status quo are basically just that, fantasies.
I guess it takes a high IQ to make that into a reality. I can't. I don't.
High IQ reject what you're being told. And you're saying, okay, Aaron, why should Aaron reject what all the news and media and government and educational system is telling him?
Nothing is leading to a military coup. I can promise you this. Only your mind is leading you there. You're very.
You study Torah, right? Isn't there a lot of precedence for it? I mean, God forbid, what if I that I could see it being like Saddam Hussein, where Saddam Hussein took power and had his political opponents shot, and saying like, why can't that happen in Israel? Why can't Lapid take power and call out his opponents and have them shot like Saddam Hussein? And certainly precedents in the Talmud, Yanai did that, and Herod did that. I mean, there were many Jewish leaders historically that did that.
When's the last time you were in Israel, Dude? It seems like you lost touch completely.
But that's not what happened with the Hashmonaim. That's not what happened with Herod. He didn't kill his Jewish opponents.
Well, I wasn't in Israel at that time. I'm in Israel now.
We're not reading the same history. That's not what happened.
Well, it's a different context, isn't it?
What Saddam Hussein did to gain power, you don't think there's a lot of precedence in Jewish history for something like that to happen?
We're not dumb Iraqis. There's too many angry
goy inside of you. You're thinking like a goy as opposed to looking what happened when the Jews had our own state in the past. Like we had corrupt leaders who crucified and slaughtered the sages. What makes you think Yair Lapid wouldn't do what Yanai did and just kill the sages?
Well, in a way, you're right. It's kind of like what Lapid's doing to slaughter the sages.
But but you're thinking like a Westerner. That's the goy inside of you. But if you're thinking like a Jew, you would think like, yeah, I could see Lapid killing the sages.
But he is kind of killing the sages if he's trying to bring them into the army. I mean, that's today's equivalent of that.
Well, and you're for it. Aaron is for the killing of the sages.
No, I think that the idea of army needs to change completely in Israel. It doesn't need to become like this religious rite the way it is today. And it just needs to be a utilitarian thing. And I don't think that every man, woman needs to participate in it for 2 or 3 years. But I don't think they'll get there unless this dynamic happens. I think that the religious should have taken this issue head on. They should have cared about the rest of Israel and said that, look, you guys don't need all these army people. Let's just make it more of a professional army. And
people, you do all the work and we make all the money. Aaron and your people, you're going to fight and work your ass off to build up the economy, and then the evil people like you will perish, and the Haredim will have the rightful heir to all of your hard work. That's what they believe, right? That's what they say. That's what they say.
No, I mean they say that they're
all the work and we get all the reward because you're evil and we're righteous.
Well, they're angry that they're carrying the religious too much on their shoulders with the economy. So I kind of like the situation. I like that the Haredim are making lots and lots of babies, lots and lots of Jews, and I like that they're holding onto the Torah. But I think that they have a legitimate argument that they need to deal with.
Yeah, so Lapid and Gantz could fight the wars, expel the Arabs, destroy Iran, die in battle, and then hand over the reins of Israel to the rightful owners, the Haredim.
But okay, when you say things like that, are you just trying to be funny, or because it just
that's what the Haredim believe. That's like our belief system. That's what we think is going to happen. Like
no, when you say I'm kind of bored of it.
Make a bunch of money,
funny,
right? Have any kids, and then give their money to the Haredim because they didn't have any kids. And the people like Lapid and Gantz are going to die in battle, preparing Israel to give it to us.
I think this is your work. Like, give me some A stuff. Like, I don't think you're bored enough. Like, come in, get some really.
Dude, that's what the Haredim are saying when they're trolling people like you online, man. That's what they're thinking. That's what they're thinking in their circle. They know.
You only have the half-Jew Duvid who studied in Haredi schools. You don't actually have Haredim trolling, but that's what the Haredim actually say.
but that there's
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true. That's their little internal troll dialogue, with the
Your ancestors created all these Jewish organizations, and then you could fade into the goyim and then hand over the reins to the proper owners, the Haredim.
Yeah, pretty much. Not before we initially
on the grave of your ancestors who created the very organizations.
Yeah, pretty much, but not before we let in the frickin' nouveau riche Ostjuden and tech assholes in who are first lording over us, and then we get to be ultimately eclipsed by the Haredim years after that. Yeah, well, first the Ostjuden nouveau riche are the first ones in line to spit on our graves, and then afterwards all the Hasidim and Haredim come spit on our graves in the second round once they ultimately eclipse everything.
Spent the fruit of your hard labor. That's
you're definitely going to build something that doesn't need to be dealt with anymore. Is that what you're saying? So, so be it. If they're going to build a utopian society that doesn't need any sort of input on the any sort of labor towards it.
God runs the world. The wicked do the work, and the righteous reap the reward. So God is tricking the wicked into doing the work in order that the righteous are going to be able to reap the reward.
Why do religious kids, they always dress up as army guys in Purim?
Because
luckily we're not actually the ones doing the work. Technically, other people are doing the. People like Levi are usually the ones who are doing the work, and then people like me get to use the fruit of their work and give it to you guys. We're more intermediaries, but close enough. Sorry, you were saying.
Let Levi, go into the army, expel the Arabs, hopefully die in battle, and then the reward.
God forbid. What do you say? Hopefully die in battle. It's a fellow Jew.
Yeah, but I'm saying he's not righteous enough to live in the society afterwards, because afterwards you're only going to have Haredim. So it's really best for him to die in battle because he's not going to be able to repent. So maybe he could have no kids and just kind of be like in a nursing home where we'll wheel him out for a ceremony every once in a while for being a war hero. But it's probably better off for in the first place that they die in battle, because they're not going to be capable of living in the messianic utopian society anyways.
Right. You really think you got things under wrap like this, huh?
That's what our religion teaches.
Really? I missed that section of the Talmud. Where does it say?
We're learning Torah. We're doing what God wants, and God will provide. And the way that God provides is by tricking the wicked into doing all the work so we could reap all the reward.
So I think that's where you're mistaken to consider.
Guys like Levi, there's no benefit. Everyone knows that at the end of the day, Israel's going to be a Haredi state. But the only way it works is to trick people like you and Levi and Babs into creating this state for us, because we don't work. We're just we need you to do it for us so that you can hand it over to us. But you guys are too selfish, so it has to work that you're tricked into doing it.
Yeah, except you fail to realize that there are you guys can make unlimited more of us. We are just versions of you that got less religious. In fact, you yourself are Baal Teshuvah. You know yourself how relatively easy the flow is in one direction and difficult it is in another. It's very easy, especially today, for Jews to secularize. So, and I mean, let's look at secularization rates now. Do either of you know the secularization rates right now for Hasidim and Haredim?
It is genetically the exact same as the people in Williamsburg.
So
yeah.
I mean, he just cut off his payas, but genetically, there's no difference between Lapid and any Husid in Williamsburg.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Ultimately, no, but that's what I'm saying is ultimately there will be, the secular Jews come from religious Jews. I mean, all of our ancestors were running around in frickin' turbans in the Middle East once,
sacrificing his son. Lapid is some rabbi sacrificing his son for the cause.
Yeah, the religious are like
Yeah, exactly. But is he sacrificing itself for the cause? You could just say it's different, like means of like kin selection, like group selection strategies. Like you could look at it from that angle. You could say like it's kind of like this multi-pronged system where ultimately the larger quote organism, like the larger so like the societal or like genetic or spiritual like entity itself is ultimately being preserved. It's just sort of like a multi-pronged layered thing, and although many individuals may not pass on their specific individual legacies, in aggregate it's sort of like the group is pushing itself forward.
Yeah, but the Star Trek Borg was really based on Hasidim. I mean, like Babs is gonna shave his head and grow payas and be in charge of the Borg.
Pretty much. Very well. I mean, it is, there is ultimately not much of a fundamental difference, actually. I'm wondering what you guys think of that. Like, how much of a divide is there between Hasidim and Haredim and in Israel and secular national religious Jews?
Almost none. I was saying, like, there's a divide internally. Yeah. Like, if you put, like, Spartam, Haredim, Litvaks, and Hasidim, like, into the same neighborhood, we would fight each other. But in terms of the outcome for what we want to happen in Israel, they're all on the same page. Like, you guys do all the fighting, you get rid of the Arabs for us, you build up the economy, and then you hand over the reins to us. Like, that's universally the belief of the Litvish, the Hasidim, the Sephardim. They all agree on that part.
Lit.
But they can't marry each other's daughters, so they're not even like Hillel and Shammai. They're not that cohesive, actually. These different sections.
They're not cohesive. Like, they don't, like, if you forced them into the same neighborhood, they wouldn't get along together. But politically, they're all aligned into you do all the fighting, you build up the economy, and then give it to us. And that like that, there's universal agreement among all the factions of Orthodox Jews of Haredim in Israel, whether they're Sephardi, Hasidic, Litvish, Polish, Hungarian. Like, there's 100% agreement among all of them. Moroccan, Iranian, Syrian. There's all 100% alignment among all Haredim in that. You do all the work, we get all the reward.
I would like to. I'm looking up where. Do you have that handy where it says the wicked work and the righteous reap? Proverbs.
Talmud. I mean, it's in the Bible multiple times, and it's in the Talmud. I'll find. I'll do a search. I'll find.
A wicked person earns deceptive wages, but the one who sows righteous reaps a sure reward. That's not what you wanted to say. That was Proverbs.
There's more than that verse, but yeah, that's a good one.
I've never heard it. That could be very easily understood because
you never heard that the Haredim, let's really say, like, like you're studying Torah, you're doing the most important task, and that like all the Israelis, like they're like you're not defending Israel. We're defending Israel by learning Torah. We're doing such a more important task than any of those people.
Yeah, but I never heard it backed up with a psuk of saying the wicked work and the righteous reap. Yeah.
You thought they just made it up? It's not even based on a verse?
No, I know that they have this idea that they're doing the righteous work. Now I agree with them to an extent. Where would we be without the religious study of Torah? If we're not, participating ourselves in the study of Torah, then that needs to be done. Someone needs to pick up the slack. But I wouldn't look at the Haredim as righteous people, because I think that righteousness is in between left and right. It's not the extreme of this. It's not too much and it's not too little. You're not supposed to add or subtract. So I think that the secular are subtracting and the religious are adding. I think that they're both not righteous.
I guess it's definitely the message of Ecclesiastics.
Okay. You have a verse or?
I'm looking at chapter 2, 18. I hated all my toil in which I toil under the sun, seeing I must leave it to the man who will come after me, and who knows whether he will be wise or a fool, yet he will be a master of all which I have toiled and used my wisdom under the sun. This is also vanity. So I turned about and gave my heart up in despair over all the toil of my labors under the sun, because sometimes a person who had toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. This is the vanity and a great evil, when a man from all the toil and striving heart with which he toils beneath the sun, for all his days are full of sorrow, and his work is a vexation. Even in the light in the night his heart does not rest. This is also vanity. There's nothing better for a person than he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God, for apart from him who can eat or who can have enjoyment? For to the one who pleases him God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy, but to the sinner he has given the business of gathering and collecting, only to give to one who pleases God.
I mean, didn't it say that you should find whether they're not working?
At the end of the day, the spoils of the riches are going to go to the righteous. So you might as well just be righteous in the first place, because even if you're not righteous, you're going to work and toil for all this gain, and then the gain is going to have to be given to someone else. And God will direct it that the gain will eventually go to the righteous. There's verses here and there in the Talmud, but I think that's the clearest place in Ecclesiastic where it's laid out. I mean, the curses here in the weekly parsha where we read the curses this week in Kitzavo, of all the curses where we're cursed, saying that you will work and someone else will reap the benefit.
Yeah, that's a curse. That's the curse version. But if you're blessed, then you will reap your own reward.
If you obey God, you will not work, and you will reap the benefit of other people's work.
No, that's not what the curses are saying. The blessing,
you're going to work, and then the benefit of your toil is going to be given to somebody else. By saying if the curse is flipped, then it's going to be the opposite, where you're not going to work, and the benefit of someone else's work is going to go to you.
No, you will receive the benefit. You will reap the benefits of your work.
Yeah, so that's the Haredi attitude, is saying like, okay, let these dumb, secular, sinful Israelis, work, and they'll pay taxes, and that taxes will go so I can have a big family and study Torah, and let the people in the army fight our enemies and die in battle so that we could be safe to study Torah.
I mean, just to play along with your line of thinking, would that mean
this is like mainstream Haredi belief?
Fine. So
you're rejecting that. That's not like mainstream Haredi opinion.
I just want to figure.
Are you honestly telling me that that's not mainstream Haredi opinion?
I'm saying that I want to learn more about it. So in this
first time you ever heard this stuff?
I've heard over and over they're doing the righteous work, but I never heard them admit out loud that you guys are doing all the work for us, and we'll just just take.
I'm only a half Jew and a Baal Tshuva, but I studied in Haredi yeshiva, so I heard this hundreds of times. So I don't know whether they published articles in the newspaper, but certainly among Haredim, this is the established doctrine. I don't know if the Haredim blast that to the secular Israelis if they go to their local Tel Aviv high-tech area or to the army ha, you do all the work and I make all the money, sucker. Right. I mean, I don't know if they're blasting, telling that, ha, you do all the work, I make all the money. I don't know.
Yeah, if you're being so righteous, why don't you be boisterous about it, Let us know.
Some of them do say that. I think, I'm pretty sure, I definitely heard this hundreds of times, but I'm pretty sure the Haredim aren't embarrassed to say this out loud to, the Israelis.
then they got something coming, don't they? If
Yeah, they have the fruits of your labors coming to them. Of course, that's what we got coming to us, the fruits of your labor.
I guess that's what it comes down to. We were looking for your motivations, and so if the unity government happens, the little gambit of yours would crumble. And you're saying that this gambit is the way is God's way, so it can't crumble.
No, I'm saying the unity government, God is righteous and will only punish the wicked Jews because they're wicked. So the wicked Israelis are going to form a unity government for the purpose of persecuting God's people, the righteous Torah scholars. So they're not forming the unity government because they want to benefit God's righteous people. They're doing it because they want to punish God's righteous people. But God's plan is that they'll form the unity government, expel the Arabs, fight the wars, make a bunch of money, die in battle, so that after that, the righteous people could have the bounty of that work. But they don't know. I'm saying like the Pede and Gantz, if they knew that the fruit of their labors would be going to the Haredim, they wouldn't do it. It's only because in their fantasies, they think the fruit of the labor is going to go to them and that the Haredim are going to be punished. But God runs the world and lets them think that they're going to be able to sin and get away with it. But they're going to die in battle, and the fruits of their labor are going to go to the Haredim.
Okay, it makes sense. Now I understand why you would come up with something so extreme and so outlandish as there's going to be a military coup. And let me explain to you why you might be mistaken. Is that this is not a righteous stand to let half of your brothers just be secular and to sweat and toil for your own benefit, so you can stay in your little air-conditioned yeshivot and study Torah all day long. The vision is that every Jew will keep the mitzvot. So if there's one side of the Jews that think that they can just keep the mitzvot for themselves and just let other Jews do the hard labor for them, that would make them not righteous people.
Yeah, I was saying, okay, so the end of the world, the only Jews left are going to be the righteous ones. So if you merit to repent and become one of the Haredim, that's possible that you will merit to be a Haredi, even though you're not really cut out to be a Haredi. Being Haredi is very difficult, but maybe you'll merit to be Haredi. If you don't merit to be Haredi, you'll either be like a goy, you'll be one of our slaves who's forced to do labor for our benefit, or you'll die in battle on our behalf.
That's where you're not righteous. Like lo b'shemaim, that's not keeping Torah commandments shouldn't be difficult. So look, I look at from afar the Haredi community and I go, gee whiz, I kind of see the benefit there. I could see myself shaving my head and keeping the payot and putting on a black suit and hanging out with my brothers and dancing at weddings. I mean, I would be actually interested in joining, but I know that they're not going to accept me. And if that's the case, if they are making a certain group that is not penetratable,
you serving God properly according to the law.
Well, no, then I would argue they're not, because if it's so difficult that you can't enter, and making this exclusive group that is
a social club that you join. You show up to daven, you show up to learn Torah. There's no acceptance.
There is acceptance.
When you go to daven in the morning and you put on your tefillin and you start chanting, or you go into the base medrash and you grab your Talmud and start learning, you don't need to be accepted to do that. You just have to do it.
I've seen these people. You've seen them do. They do everything that's required of them to the T. Never swerve left or right, and they're still not accepted.
The Haredim think that they're righteous. Not all the Haredim are going to be the true righteous. You're saying a lot of the Haredim are fakers and they don't really learn Torah. They don't really daven.
Well, there you go. So then we're in agreement.
It's just like a social clique where they're basically welfare whores.
Right. So now you can understand that it's on the table that they're going to get smacked.
Well, I say, okay, the Haredim don't accept you because they're welfare whores and they don't want to share the welfare with you. But the true righteous among the Haredim, if you showed up in davened Ehrlich and were serious about your Torah study, they would accept you.
No, I've seen these guys. I've seen them.
They're not the welfare whores, but there's...
No, I've seen them, and they're not accepted by anyone. They're
you said there's zero righteous Haredim. there's no one that if you came into Davin righteous, if you came
Hey,
into Davin
I
nice,
kind of like this about them. You know,
Torah would respect that they're all corrupt, they're all welfare whores, every single last one of them.
I'm saying that, well, I think that they have this idea if they can let their brothers die in war for them, that's obviously not Torah. I mean, it's Torah 101. That's why Reuben and God was, wanted to keep the east part of the Jordan River to themselves, even though it wasn't allowed by God. And the stipulation was that they had to fight all the wars, and that was the main worry, that they wouldn't fight the wars that the other Israelites would fight. So they're sinning 101.
Yeah,
So
but Haredim should be righteous. They're saying like, okay, you're right that the Haredim are wrong, and that you can't be like a welfare whore and suck off the blood of secular Jews and goyim.
Yeah, you just regarded it before.
Like 80% of Haredim think like that. I mean, there are some righteous rabbis, some righteous Haredim, but like, yeah, you're right that probably like 75% of Haredim are basically welfare bloodsuckers.
It's beyond
in theory, God forbid, like when Jerusalem was destroyed, and there was only a handful of righteous people that survived in Yanai, or wherever in Gamla, or where slipping me right now because I'm been up all night. But saying like, okay, so the zealots thought that there was going to be these hundreds of these countless righteous people that would reap the benefits of the Lord. But it turned out, like in God's reality, that there was only actually a few hundred righteous people that survived the Roman destruction. So I mean, yeah, that's likely. Say like not like 500,000 Haredim are going to take over Israel. That like in reality, of the 500,000 Haredim in Israel, probably like far less than 10% of them are righteous, and most of them are going to God forbid, it's not going to be good for them either, because they're not really righteous.
Right. So it seemed like we started at one point where you were arguing that they were the righteous ones, and it seems like we've gone into more of a place where
the truly righteous ones don't think that they're the righteous ones. The truly righteous ones they care about you too. But your average Haredi, they just see that in Ecclesiastics, and they're like, ha ha, sucker, you do all the work and I make all the money, nah, 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 nah. And it's like, yeah, the true righteous people don't think like that. But the masses of Haredim, that is what they do think. The masses of Haredim are just like, sucker!
I can see that.
But
anyway,
you believe in Hashem, you believe in Torah, and you say, no, those masses of Haredim, that like at the end of the day, the true Haredim are going to win. And you can see those people across Israel, they're not real Haredim, they're fake.
No, to me, like the Haredim are like ISIS before they take over. Like once, as you said,
do believe you do believe in the Torah, and that the true righteous people that are going to be a lot more like the Haredim than the seculars are going to reap the benefit. Like you do believe what Ecclesiastic says, and that the wicked will do the work and the righteous will reap the reward.
I think that it's such a heavy burden to be righteous in Torah sense.
Well, I think a righteous person doesn't think they're righteous. It's the paradox of being righteous, where the righteous don't think they're righteous, and that's why they're humble. And the Haredim generally are very arrogant people. They think they're righteous, and so by Torah, kind of like, if you think you're righteous, you're probably not righteous.
Well, I think that by the very fact that all the commandments were given to every single Jew rather than just an elite Jew means that it can't be that difficult. So the way that the Haredim keep it, it's very difficult. And I there's a part of me that likes that about them. You always want to belong to the club that won't have you as a member. But I as the end times, I see.
And you want to belong to the club that you believe deep down in your heart is truly representative of what it means to be a Jew. And when you look in your heart as a Jew, you know that you feel the Haredim are more representative of what it means to be a Jew than you are.
Than I am. Possibly they're more authentic than I am, sure. But
even in Gantz, when they look in the mirror, they know that the Haredim are going to be the inheritors of the benefit of Israel.
No, I don't think that they will be, David. I really don't. So I'm sorry. I'm not going to go along with you on that one. I think that we're going to go through a lot of turmoil and a lot of changes, and I think that the ultimate Jew that the righteous Jew that will end up won't look like me, won't look like you, won't look like the Haredim. It'll be something simple and something beautiful. As all beautiful things usually are. They're usually simple.
Yeah, but you don't think I mean, obviously God's ways aren't man's way, and I was talking on the Claire stream about the man's eye view versus the God's eye view. But like the method, so and from the man's eye view, you have to be humble. You can't self-include yourself in the righteous. Just like Gandalf or whatever. You can't declare yourself a cult leader. You need followers to declare you cult leader. You can't self-appoint yourself a leader. You need to be appointed by followers. I mean, that's basically.
Ain't nobody more humble than me. I'm the most humble motherfucker on the planet. Anyway, I'm gonna head out, Duvid. It's good talking to you.
Okay, yeah. I was thinking about these Israeli, like thank God you were here, because my fellow Jews don't know crap about Israel.
Right, gotta educate them. Talk to you later, man. Bye.
Yep. Shalom. Anyone else here still? Just Duvid? Mansoor? You like heavy metal, right? Anyone know that Bob Seger song that Metallica did a cover of, the On the Road Again, on the stage, Here I Am? You want to chat know that? Here I am on the road again. Here I go upon the stage. Here I am playing the star again. Here I go, turn the page. You know that song, Colin? It's out of Michigan. Bob Seger was from Michigan. He wasn't a Detroiter, but that's a Michigan song.